Hey everybody, what's up and welcome back to my channel. For those who might be new here, my name is Evan Andrews and here on my channel we are talking everything creative from videography to photography and even graphic design. And today is going to be a pretty special video because we haven't done many videos on this particular subject yet, and that is the subject of graphic design. I really just wanted to go through kind of some basic and fundamental aspects of graphic design as an overall whole. I saw an interesting video online a few days ago and kind of just inspired me to do this, and I'm going to kind of take from them a little bit and some of the knowledge that they shared, and I'm going to kind of reshare it with you guys today. In the description below you will find a link also to their video. You might find a lot of similarities from our videos just because it's going to be a knowledge-based video, but I hope you enjoy this one and go show some love over there on that video as well. So without talking about it anymore, we're going to kind of just get into the fundamentals and basics of graphic design. All right, so first let's kind of just break down what graphic design really means. Design comes from a root word meaning to designate, and graphic is just another simple way of saying to visually communicate something. So that's kind of where we get the terminology from, just so that you guys out there can understand it a little bit more. All right, so now we're gonna kind of jump into kind of 10 basic areas of graphic design, and these are really in no particular order of understanding them or learning about them. It's just really kind of 10 pillars that make up the overall subject of graphic design. And the first one is going to be the understanding of color or color theory. So the first thing that you're going to want to understand with color is that you're going to want to utilize colors that are attention grabbing colors. Things like red and brighter, more warmer colors are definitely going to be attention grabbing style colors. And another thing with color that is very, very important in graphic design is understanding how to use it in contrast with other colors. For example, kind of something like McDonald's, for example, is red and yellow, and these colors contrast each other on the color wheel, and they also invoke a sense of hunger inside of us. So, you might see red and yellow as a major theme throughout things like food and different areas of that in our society. The next sort of pillar that goes into graphic design is going to be typography or fonts, and these are very important to utilize to a minimum in your designs when you are doing it. You never want to have really more than two. I say sometimes three if you can kind of get away with it in using one of them very, very scarcely, but you never really want to use more than two. And again, visually you want them to contrast. So if you might be using a very bold style font for a particular area of your design, you're going to want to use something like a thinner, maybe sans serif, to completely contrast it and draw the attention of the viewer to the areas that you want to draw them to. Now, for those that don't know, the difference between serif and sans serif is serifs have the little ticks on the ends of the lettering that you might be used to seeing. We see this a lot in books because it helps with keeping our eyes on an even line plane. And sans serif is just the opposite of that. Sans meaning without, it does not have the little tick marks, and they are kind of what you might think of as like a block letter or something like that. Moving on to our next pillar, we are going to have what is called the white space or the negative space. Now, you're probably going to, early in your graphic design career, want to fill up the entire page or the entire artboard or whatever it is that you're designing on, and that's not always the best thing to do, because the white space or the negative space kind of acts as a carrier for our eyeballs as the viewer to go from one piece to another piece to another piece. So don't get caught up in trying to fill everything up and fill all the space, because more often than not, your designs will become cluttered and really turn off the viewer and make it kind of unpleasing to them, and they're not gonna wanna sit there and be motivated by your design. Our next pillar that we're going to want to focus on for especially new beginners out there is keeping alignment cohesive. So there are a lot of design tools out there that have a grid feature to them, and you're going to want to utilize this every time that you're designing something. Keeping things cohesively aligned is going to help draw that eye to the right place that you want it to go to. And that's going to be a key thing in any kind of design that you're doing, is you always want to keep the viewer motivated to go from one thing to the next to the next. And keeping things aligned, whether it's justified to the left, maybe the right, or you have something down the center, that is always going to help keep them on pace and on track in viewing your design. Our next pillar that we have kind of goes in conjunction with the previously mentioned typography, and that is having good readability in the text that you're using in your design. For example, if you're designing a magazine page or something that's very text heavy, you're gonna want it to be readable by the viewer. And readability comes in a lot of different formats. Contrast is one, color is a big thing. Going back to the first thing that we mentioned, if something is too light on a white page and it's hard to read, chances are people are gonna miss it or skip over it, and then it's gonna kind of throw them off and they're not gonna really wanna finish reading or looking at what you've created. So readability is very, very crucial, especially when dealing with color. Another part of readability is not having things too squished or too stretched out in as far as spacing between maybe your letters or different things like that. So you want to have just the right amount of characters on the page on a single line, and you don't want to overcrowd or undercrowd. So when you're designing, just make sure that you're aware of this, and it's only going to help you overall with your design. This next pillar is what I personally think is the most crucial pillar of graphic design, and that is going to be what we call hierarchy. Now, hierarchy is basically kind of, like I said, the order in which you want people to view things. So our headings are going to be a lot bigger than maybe a particular graphic, or it might be vice versa, and the graphic might be bigger than a particular piece of information. You want to draw their eye to one spot first and then to another. So a popular way of utilizing hierarchy in kind of the placement of our graphics or our text is the Z-shaped pattern, and that's where we kind of start over here and have the reader read and then come down diagonally back to where we started from and then go back to the other side of the page. And that is a very comfortable way in the way that our brains are kind of trained and used to viewing things on a page or on a screen. We want to look left to right, back down, reset, and go back. So hierarchy as far as placement and the size of our graphics is very, very crucial in getting the point across with what we're creating. So the next pillar, and another big thing that you're going to want to think about kind of in the pre-planning stage before you do your design, is making sure that your design fits what you're making it for. You would not want to make a poster or a flyer for, let's say, a metal band with a lot of maybe bright rainbow type colors, you know, unless that fits the aesthetic of their band. But generally with certain styles and certain images, we use a certain look. So for a kid's daycare, you don't want to use the opposite of that and have skulls and death and blood and different things like that, because it doesn't fit the aesthetic of what you're designing for. Always make sure that you're fitting the motif of what it is that you're designing for, and that's one of the biggest things as far as advice that I can offer to you. So the next pillar that goes back to typography as well is we want to refrain from having what we call widows and orphans on our page. An orphan is a piece of text that gets put off to maybe the next column and is by itself. And a widow is a piece of text that gets put down to another line and is by itself under another piece of information or set of text. So we want to avoid that because it kind of leaves the reader a little confused when they're reading the line. The best thing that you can do to kind of combat this is play around with your text size and the alignment of the text. This, more often than not, with just a few simple adjustments, will kind of fix those problems. And if you realize that is not fixing those problems, you might want to reword your text or revisit what it is you're exactly portraying with the text. Pillar number 9 that you want to get in the biggest habit of, if you can, is the utilization of vector graphics in design. And what a vector graphic is it's a graphic that allows you to blow up and shrink down to any size without losing any quality in the image. Vector graphics, they keep their sleek, smooth edges, and they are just really good for any kinds of designs, whether we're blowing up something really big to put it on a billboard or something very small in black and white in, let's say, a newspaper, for example. Vector graphics are going to be the best thing that we can utilize, and vector graphics are pretty easy to find out there, and they're pretty easy to create once you kind of get into the software of your choosing and kind of figure that out. The software that I use is Adobe Illustrator to create these. That's because I am a huge fan of the entire Adobe suite. But there are other programs out there like CorelDRAW that allow you to create these vector graphics pretty easily once you're gonna get used to the program. So always use vector graphics where you can, and refrain from using rasterized stuff when you don't need to. And finally, to wrap up, our last pillar is going to be graphic designers understanding the world of marketing. Now, you don't need to necessarily understand all the odds and ends of how marketing is done, but what you do need to understand, and this kind of goes back to understanding what you're designing for, is that you want to understand the message that is going to be portrayed so that you can set yourself up to make the best design that you can. If you can understand what marketers want in a design to better serve or better sell a product or a service, then you're only gonna have that much more success in making your designs on the front end. Again, for something maybe like a lawn service, you're not gonna wanna use a lot of dark colors, blacks, different things like that. You're gonna wanna use greens, blues, whites, yellows, things that are very bright and vibrant to put the right emotion and the right context into the design. When you understand a little bit about marketing and what you need to portray to the viewer, it makes designing that much easier for you on the front end. All right, so that's gonna do it for today's video. I hope you guys got some value out of this and learned a little bit about the kind of segments or pillars of graphic design and some of the things that you wanna learn and look into when starting your graphic design career. Graphic design was something that I went to school for way back about 10 years ago, and for those that are following me and are watching my channel, you can see that I have transitioned pretty heavy to video and photography, but that's just because that's where my life has taken me. If you are an artist out there and you are really good at drawing and you really want to make a career out of being able to provide a graphic design service to somebody, then I highly recommend getting into it. Learn how to create those vector images, learn how to put stuff on a page in a fitting manner to where it makes sense to people. And once you see this really happen within yourself and you kind of get out of the lens of like, oh, I just like that because I made it, but when you show it to other people and they really respond to it in a positive light, then it's gonna be just that much better for you to really understand that you are on the right track and doing what you need to do to further your career in graphic design. So if you got some value out of this video, make sure you go like this video, subscribe to the channel, and make sure you join us every Friday where we are here talking everything creative from videography to photography and even graphic design. So until next Friday, I will see you guys then, and it's peace out.